The battle raged like a storm of fire and steel, a cacophony of energy blasts and the thunder of mechanized war machines echoing across the barren wasteland. Captain Darius Holt piloted his battered dropship through the chaos, weaving between falling debris and hostile fighters. His mission was simple: extract survivors and get them to safety. A routine task, he thought. Or at least as routine as anything could be in humanity's endless war with the Kreveth Dominion. The distress signal had come from the ruins of an old outpost, now little more than a scorched skeleton of metal and stone. Darius scanned the area, his HUD flickering as the onboard AI struggled to distinguish friend from foe in the electromagnetic interference. There, he muttered, spotting a figure darting through the rubble, pursued by 3 Kreveth drones. The humanoid shape moved with a fluid grace that was rare among battle-weary soldiers. Darius slammed the controls, sending his ship into a sharp dive. The drones opened fire, but he was faster, unleashing a precise volley from the ship's turrets. The drones exploded in a brilliant display of light, and the figure stopped, turning toward the dropship. Darius lowered the ship to the ground, the hatch hissing open. "Get in!" he barked through the external speakers. The figure hesitated for a moment, then sprinted toward the ship. It wasn't until they were aboard, the hatch sealed, and the dropship rocketing back into the sky that Darius got his first clear look at her. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, with sharp features and piercing silver eyes that seemed to see right through him. Her clothes were torn and scorched, revealing patches of strange, shimmering tattoos along her arms and neck. "Who are you?" Darius asked, his tone more curious than accusatory. "My name is Kayla," she replied, her voice calm despite the circumstances. "Thank you for the rescue, Captain." He noticed the way she said Captain, like it was a title she respected. Most civilians didn't care much for formalities, especially not during wartime. But there was something else about her, something that set her apart from the countless refugees he'd saved before. "You're not just a civilian, are you?" he asked, eyeing the tattoos. Kayla hesitated, then sighed. "No, I'm not. I was trained for something important, but that's not relevant right now. We need to get clear of this sector before the Kreveth reinforcements arrive." Darius didn't argue. Whoever she was right. The Kreveth never left survivors without a fight, and he had no intention of sticking around to test their resolve. As the dropship streaked through the upper atmosphere, Kayla moved to the co-pilot's seat, her eyes scanning the controls with an unsettling familiarity. "You've flown before?" Darius asked, raising an eyebrow. "Once or twice," she said cryptically, her hands brushing over the console as if she were reacquainting herself with an old friend. The ship's AI chimed in. "Warning, Kreveth fighters incoming. Evasive maneuvers recommended." "Strap in," Darius said, gripping the controls. But before he could initiate a maneuver, Kayla leaned over and tapped a sequence into the console. The ship shuddered, then surged forward with a sudden burst of speed that Darius hadn't thought possible. "What did you just do?" he demanded, staring at her in disbelief. "Enhance the thrusters," she replied casually. "Your ship is more capable than you realize. Now, let's focus on not dying, shall we?" For the next 10 minutes, Kayla and Darius worked in perfect sync, evading the pursuing fighters and navigating through a deadly asteroid field that would have been suicidal under normal circumstances. By the time they reached the safety of human-controlled space, Darius was both exhausted and thoroughly impressed. As the ship docked at a nearby station, Kayla stood and turned to him. "Thank you, Captain. I owe you my life." Darius waved her off. "Just doing my job. But you're not telling me everything, are you?" Kayla smiled, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "No, I'm not. But you'll understand soon enough." With that, she disappeared into the crowd of refugees disembarking from the ship. Darius watched her go, a nagging feeling in his gut telling him that this wasn't the last he'd see of her. Months passed, and Darius continued his missions, though he couldn't shake the memory of Kayla. Then, one day, the news broke. A new leader had emerged among the human resistance, uniting disparate factions and pushing back against the Kreveth with unprecedented success. Her name was Kayla, the voice of unity, and she carried the mark of the ancients, a forgotten legacy of humanity's distant past, now wielded to secure its future. Darius stared at the broadcast in disbelief. The young woman he had rescued from the battlefield was now humanity's greatest hope, a beacon of strength and resilience in their darkest hour. And somewhere, deep down, he felt a swell of pride. He had saved her that day, never realizing he was rescuing a future leader. Darius couldn't get her out of his mind, especially now that her face was everywhere. Kayla's speeches were stirring, her strategies were bold, and her uncanny ability to unite even the most fractured factions made her a legend in record time. But for all her accomplishments, she seemed untouchable, her every move cloaked in mystery. Sitting in a dimly lit cantina on a remote station, Darius nursed a glass of synth whiskey and watched one of her broadcasts. Kayla stood on a raised platform, addressing a crowd of soldiers and civilians. Her voice, steady and confident, filled the room. "We are more than survivors," she said, her silver eyes seeming to pierce through the screen. "We are the inheritors of a legacy written in the stars. Together, we will reclaim what was taken and build a future where humanity can thrive." The room erupted in cheers. Darius leaned back in his chair, shaking his head with a wry smile. "You've come a long way, haven't you?" he muttered. "Captain Holt," a voice said, pulling him from his thoughts. He turned to see a man in a sleek uniform standing at attention. The insignia on his chest marked him as part of the resistance. "You're being requested for a classified mission." Direct orders from the voice herself. Darius blinked. "Kayla." The man nodded. "Follow me." Moments later, Darius found himself aboard a resistance shuttle, hurtling toward an undisclosed location. The trip was brief, and when they landed, he stepped out onto a sprawling command ship bristling with weaponry and technology far beyond anything he'd seen before. "Captain Holt," a familiar voice called. He turned to see Kayla approaching, flanked by two advisors. She looked different now, more composed, more regal, but her silver eyes still held that piercing intensity. "Kayla," he said, unable to keep the surprise out of his voice. Or should I say voice of unity? She smiled faintly. "Kayla is fine, Darius. It's good to see you again. You called me here," he said, falling into step beside her as she led him through the ship's corridors. "Why?" "Because I need someone I can trust," she said simply. "And you've already proven yourself." He frowned. "Trust for what, exactly?" She stopped in front of a large viewport, the endless expanse of space stretching out before them. "There's something the Kriveth are hiding," she said. "A weapon. One capable of ending this war in their favor. We've intercepted fragments of data, but we need someone who can get in, find the truth, and get out. That someone is you." Darius raised an eyebrow. "And you think I can pull this off?" "I don't think," she said, turning to face him. "I know. You're one of the best pilots and tacticians we have. More importantly, you've got a knack for surviving impossible situations. I'd say that makes you perfect for the job." He looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "All right, I'm in. What's the plan?" Kayla's expression softened. "I'll brief you in detail, but for now, just know this. The mission is dangerous, but it's critical. If we fail, humanity might not get another chance." Over the next few hours, Kayla laid out the mission parameters. The Kriveth weapon was hidden deep within a fortified asteroid base, surrounded by a fleet of warships. Darius's team would need to infiltrate the base, retrieve the weapon schematics, and sabotage its systems before escaping. As she spoke, Darius couldn't help but notice the weight on her shoulders. She carried herself with the confidence of a leader, but there was a vulnerability there too, a quiet acknowledgement of the stakes. "You're risking a lot, putting this on me," he said as they wrapped up the briefing. "I trust you," she replied. "And I believe in you." The words hit him harder than he expected. He nodded. "Then I won't let you down." When the time came, Darius and his team launched their mission. The infiltration was brutal, the Kriveth defenses nearly overwhelming, but Darius's instincts and Kayla's faith in him pushed him through. They retrieved the schematics and planted explosives throughout the base, narrowly escaping as the weapon facility erupted in a fiery cascade. Back on the command ship, Kayla met him in the hangar. He was battered and exhausted, but alive. You did it, she said, a rare smile breaking across her face. Darius chuckled, leaning against the hull of his dropship. You sound surprised. Not at all, she replied. But you've done more than just succeed. You've given humanity a fighting chance. He looked at her, his expression softening. We all have a role to play, don't we? She nodded. We do. And together, we'll see this through. As the ship hummed with the energy of a resistance fleet preparing for its next move, Darius realized that Kayla wasn't just a leader. She was a symbol of hope, a reminder that humanity could rise above its struggles and claim its place among the stars. And he would follow her to the end. The weeks following the mission were a blur of preparation and tension. With the Kreveth weapon destroyed and the schematics safely in Resistance hands, Kayla's forces were gaining momentum. Yet, every victory seemed to come at a higher cost, and the war's toll on humanity was impossible to ignore. Darius found himself increasingly drawn into Kayla's inner circle. He was no longer just a pilot or a soldier. He was an advisor, a confidant, and, though he would never admit it, a source of stability for Kayla herself. They spent long hours poring over battle plans and discussing strategy, often arguing but always finding common ground. One evening, as they stood together in the command ship's war room, Kayla turned to him, her expression uncharacteristically weary. Do you ever wonder if it's all worth it? She asked quietly. Darius raised an eyebrow. The war? The sacrifices? Or something else? She sighed, running a hand through her hair. All of it. Sometimes I feel like no matter how much we accomplish, it's never enough. For every battle we win, the Kreveth seem to come back stronger. And the people they look to me like I have all the answers, but I'm just trying to keep us from falling apart. Darius crossed his arms, studying her. You're doing more than that. You've given them hope. You've united factions that were at each other's throats for decades. That's no small feat. Kayla gave a faint smile. And yet, it doesn't feel like enough. He stepped closer, his voice firm but gentle. It is enough. You're enough. And if you ever start doubting that, just remember how far we've come because of you. She looked up at him, her silver eyes glinting with a mix of gratitude and something deeper, something unspoken. Thank you, Darius. I don't think I've said it enough, but I wouldn't be here without you. You would have found a way, he said with a smirk. You're too stubborn to let anything stop you. Her laughter was soft but genuine, and for a brief moment, the weight of the war seemed to lift. But the reprieve was short-lived. Days later, a message arrived from one of their deep cover operatives. The Kreveth were preparing a counterstrike, and their target was humanity's largest remaining colony, Haven Prime. The colony was a vital hub for the Resistance, housing millions of civilians and serving as a staging ground for their operations. If it fell, the consequences would be catastrophic. Kayla wasted no time assembling her top advisors, Darius among them. The war room buzzed with tension as holographic projections of Haven Prime and the incoming Kreveth fleet filled the air. They're throwing everything they've got at us, one advisor said grimly. This isn't just an assault. It's an extermination. Kayla's jaw tightened. Then we won't let them succeed. Darius, what's your assessment? He studied the projections, his mind racing. The Kreveth fleet outnumbered them 3-1, and their ships were more advanced. But there were weaknesses, blind spots in their formations, vulnerabilities they could exploit. We'll need to split our forces, he said. Draw their fleet into a trap while a second team reinforces Haven Prime's defenses. It's risky, but it might be our best shot. Kayla nodded, her eyes sharp with determination. Then let's make it happen. The plan was set into motion. Darius led the decoy fleet, engaging the Kreveth in a deadly game of cat and mouse while Kayla coordinated the defense of Haven Prime. The battle was brutal, each side suffering heavy losses, but humanity's resolve held firm. As the tide began to turn, Darius's fleet managed to lure the Kreveth flagship into a precarious position. He launched a daring assault, targeting its power core and crippling the enemy's command structure. Meanwhile, Kayla's forces on Haven Prime repelled wave after wave of ground troops, her leadership inspiring the defenders to fight with unmatched ferocity. When the dust settled, the Kreveth fleet was in full retreat, their forces shattered. Haven Prime stood, battered but unbroken, and the resistance celebrated a hard-won victory. In the aftermath, Darius returned to the command ship, weary but triumphant. Kayla was waiting for him in the hangar, her expression a mixture of relief and pride. "You did it," she said as he stepped off his dropship. "We did it," he corrected, a small smile tugging at his lips. She stepped closer, her silver eyes locking onto his. "I couldn't have done this without you." He chuckled softly. "You keep saying that, but I think we both know you're the real reason we're still standing." Kayla hesitated, then reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe, but it helps knowing I have someone like you by my side." For a moment, the weight of the war faded, replaced by a quiet understanding between them. They had come so far together, and though the road ahead would be long and uncertain, they both knew they could face it as long as they had each other. The battle for humanity's future was far from over, but in that moment, they allowed themselves a rare luxury: hope. The war dragged on for another year. Relentless struggle that pushed humanity to its limits. Every victory brought losses, and every setback was a reminder of what was at stake. But under Kayla's leadership and with Darius at her side, humanity persevered. The turning point came when the Resistance decoded an ancient signal buried in the schematics Darius had retrieved from the Kriveth weapon facility. The signal wasn't Kriveth in origin. It was human. A message left behind by humanity's first explorers who had ventured into the stars centuries ago. The message spoke of a hidden bastion, a sanctuary built during the early days of interstellar colonization, equipped with technologies far beyond anything humanity currently possessed. "This could be what we need to end the war," Kayla said, her voice filled with hope as she addressed the Resistance's leadership. It wasn't easy to locate the bastion. The Kriveth were relentless in their pursuit, and the journey to the coordinates provided in the message was fraught with danger. But Kayla and Darius pressed on, leading a fleet of humanity's best and brightest to what would either be their salvation or their doom. When they arrived, the sight took their breath away. The bastion wasn't just a station. It was a colossal Dyson sphere, a shimmering construct encircling a star. Its surface gleamed with cities and advanced systems powered by the energy of the sun itself. The sheer scale of it was incomprehensible, a testament to the brilliance of humanity's ancestors. As they approached, the bastion's automated defenses came online, scanning their fleet. Kayla stepped forward, transmitting a message encoded with the ancient signal. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, the defenses powered down, and a voice, calm, mechanical, yet undeniably human, responded. "Welcome, heirs of Earth. The legacy of the Vanguard is yours to reclaim." Inside the bastion, they found weapons, ships, and knowledge. Technologies that could turn the tide of the war. But more importantly, they discovered something they hadn't expected: records of the Kriveth's origins. The Dominion wasn't an alien invader. It was a fractured offshoot of humanity, survivors of a failed colony experiment who had been warped and twisted by generations of adaptation to hostile conditions. Kayla made a bold decision. With the Bastion's newfound power, she reached out to the Kriveth, offering them peace. It was a gamble, one that many in the Resistance opposed, but Kayla was adamant. "We are the same," she said. "We were once divided by circumstance, but we can choose unity over destruction. If we don't, this war will consume us all." At first, the Kriveth rejected her overtures, their leaders unwilling to trust. But Kayla's persistence, bolstered by the overwhelming power of the Bastion, eventually forced them to the negotiating table. The talks were long and fraught with tension, but they ended with an agreement, a ceasefire and a joint effort to rebuild what had been lost. The war was over. Months turned into years, and humanity began to heal. The Kriveth, once sworn enemies, became allies, their knowledge and resilience helping to rebuild a galaxy scarred by conflict. The Bastion became a symbol of what humanity could achieve when united, a beacon of hope for the future. Kayla stood at the heart of it all, her silver eyes ever watchful as she guided humanity into a new era. Darius remained by her side, a steadfast ally and friend. Though the weight of leadership never left her, Kayla found solace in knowing she wasn't alone. One quiet evening, as they stood together on a balcony overlooking the cities of the Bastion, Kayla turned to Darius. "You once asked me if it was all worth it," she said softly. He nodded. "And?" She smiled, her gaze sweeping over the stars. "It was. Every sacrifice, every struggle, every moment of doubt. It led us here. And for that, I'm grateful." Darius smiled back, his voice steady. "Then I'm glad I could be a part of it." Together, they watched as humanity's future unfolded before them. A future forged from the ashes of war, bound by unity, and lit by the brilliance of the stars.